Okay. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Welcome, welcome. Hi, Miss Regina. Janice, hello. Thank you all for joining me this evening for this book read. Of course, we are reading Wicked. Yes. So this will actually be our second reading. If you happened to miss the first reading last week, please feel free to go to my YouTube channel and you can find it it's going to probably be at the very top of my playlist because it's my most recent upload. But you will find the other books that I've also read on here. I think in sequential order. I think I've gotten them loaded in the correct order, and if not, they're labeled so you can't get lost. So I hope you guys enjoy this evening's read. I know I will. I'm very excited. And hello, Jessica, Renasme the Fairy. Love it. Kareen, Alex, Blake, hello, hello. I'm so glad you guys could have joined me this evening for this. Typically what we do is we wait till about 5 after to get started, just to give people a chance to log on and get comfy. I, however, got on here just like a tiny bit later than normal, so we'll give it a few more minutes just so everyone can get logged in and get settled. I lost track of time. My bad. But I also want to take this moment to let you guys know that I guess with this with the TikTok ban, the hard ban going on the 19th, this is going to be my last reading here on this app. And that makes me profoundly sad. So for anyone who has been following me, the 30,000 plus followers I have on this account, thank you. I love you. It's been absolutely amazing sharing this journey with you. And you can still find me on YouTube. For now, I still have an Instagram account. And if you go to the link in my bio, you'll be able to find that info. But and I'm probably gonna end up making like a Blue Sky account. When I get that figured out, I will let people know on YouTube. I will let everyone know what the name is, how to reach me, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I just want to thank you all so very much for sharing your time with me, sharing your lives with me. This kind of connection it's really a thing of beauty, and it's such a shame that we have to lose it for no real good reason. Oh, you're a subscriber. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's not fair that we're losing an app that has quite literally, in a lot of ways, changed the world over the course of the last few years. It's connected people. It has connected communities, created communities. It's just there aren't enough correct words to put this into just the perspective of how awful losing this app is going to be. But hi, Miss Susie Q. But we will find community in other venues. We will find connection with other people in other places and in other platforms. We won't stop connecting. And I hope at some point that's something that the people who are in power finally get through their thick ancient skulls, is that we will never stop connecting with each other, sharing with each other, encouraging each other, building with each other. We will never stop, because that's where our real power is. is with each other, connecting with each other and creating with each other. And I just want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to connect and share and create with you. It's been a joy, and it has been a pleasure. So Susie, yes, I'm on YouTube currently. Like all of my Nikki content is on my YouTube channel. All of my book readings so far, those two main sources of content are already on my YouTube channel. So you just go to my bio, and you'll be able to find the link in my bio to my YouTube channel. Once I get either Red Note or Blue Sky, I still haven't figured out which of those platforms I'm going to hang out on. I don't know. But once I have a new platform, I will let you know. I will let you know. Okay. I will let you know what it is. Don't you worry. So, all right. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The Quadling Glassblower. For one short, wet month, early in the next year, the drought lifted. Spring tipped in like green well water, frothing at the hedges, bubbling at the roadside, splashing from the cottage roof in garlands of ivy and stringflower. Melina went about the yard in a state of mild undress, so that she could feel the sun on her pale skin and the deep warmth she had missed all winter. Strapped in her chair in the doorway, Elphaba, now a year and a half old, hit her breakfast minnow with the bowl of her spoon. "Oh, eat the thing, don't mash it," said Melina, but mildly. Since the child's chin-sling had been removed, mother and daughter had begun to pay some attention to each other. To her surprise, Melina sometimes found Elphaba endearing, the way a baby should be. This view was the only thing she had seen since leaving the elegant mansion of her family, the only thing she would ever gaze upon again. The wind-swept surface of Ilswater, the distant dark stone cottages and chimneys of rush margins on the other side, the hills lying in a torpor beyond. She would go mad. The world was nothing but water and want. In a frolic of elves scampered through the yard, she would leap on them for company, for sex, for murder. "Your father is a fraud," she said to Elphaba, "off, finding himself all winter, leaving me with only you for company. Eat the breakfast, for you'll get no more if you throw it on the ground." Elphaba picked up the fish and threw it on the ground. "Your father is a charlatan," continued Melina. "He used to be very good in bed for a religious man, and this is how I know his secret. Holy men are supposed to be above earthly pleasures, but your father enjoyed his midnight wrestling. Once upon a time. We must never tell him we know he's a humbug. It would break his heart. We don't want to break his heart, do we?" And then Melina burst into a high peal of laughter. Elphaba's face was unsmiling, unchanging. She pointed to the fish. "Breakfast. Breakfast in the dirt. Breakfast for the bugs," Melina said. She dropped the collar of her spring robe a little lower, and the pink yoke of her bare shoulders gyrated. "Shall we go walk by the edge of the lake today, and maybe you'll drown?" But Elphaba would never drown. Never, because she would not go near the lake. "Maybe we'll go out in a boat and tip over," Melina shrieked. Elphaba cocked her head to one side, as if listening for some part of her mother, not intoxicated with leaves and wine. The sun swept out from behind a cloud. Elphaba scowled. Melina's robe dropped lower. Her breasts worked their way out from between the dirty ruffles of the collar. "Look at me," thought Melina, "showing my breast to the child I couldn't give milk to for fear of amputation. I, who was the rose of Nest Hardings. I, who was the beauty of my generation. And now I am reduced to company I don't even want. My own squirming, thorny little girl. She is more grasshopper than girl, with those angular little thighs, those arching eyebrows, those poking fingers. She's about the business of learning like any child, but she takes no delight in the world. She pushes and breaks and nibbles on things without any pleasure, as if she has a mission to taste and measure all the disappointments of life, in which rush margins is amply supplied. Mercy from the unnamed God. She's a creep, she is. She is. Or we might take a walk in the woods today and pick the last of the winter berries. Melina was full of guilt at her lack of motherly feeling. We can put them in a pie. Can we put them in a pie? Shall we, honey? Elphaba didn't speak yet, but she nodded and began to wiggle to get down. Melina started a clapping game Elphaba took no notice of. The child grunted and pointed to the ground and arched her long, elegant legs to illustrate her desire. Then she gestured to the gate leading from the kitchen garden and the hen yard. There was a man at the uprights of the gate, leaning, shy and hungry-looking, with the skin the color of roses at twilight, a dusky, shadowy red. He had a couple of leathern satchels on his shoulders and back, a walking staff, and a dangerously handsome, hollow-looking face. Melina screeched and caught herself, directed her voice to a lower register. It had been so long since she had spoken to anyone but a whining toddler. "Good glory, you startled us," she cried. "Are you searching for some breakfast?" She had lost the social touch. For instance, her breasts should not be staring at him so, yet she did not clasp her gown. "Please to forgive a sudden appearance by a strange foreigner at Ladies' Gate," said the man. "Of course, forgiven," she said impatiently. "Come in where I can see you. Come in, come in." Elphaba had seen so few other people in her life that she hid one eye behind her spoon and peeked with the other eye. The man approached. His movements showed the clumsiness of exhaustion. He was large of ankle and thick of foot, slender about the waist and shoulders, and thick again in the neck, as if he had been made on a lathe and worked too briefly at his extremities. His hands, letting down the satchels, seemed like beasts with minds of their own. They were outsized and splendid. "Traveler, not to know where he is," said the man. "2 nights to cross the hills from Downhill Cornings, to look for the inn at 3 Dead Trees, to rest." "You're lost. You veered," said Melina, deciding not to be perplexed at his scrambled words. "No matter. Let me fix you a meal, and you can tell me your story." Her hands were at her hair, which once used to be thought precious as spun brass. At least it was clean. The man was sleek and fit. When he removed his cap, his hair fell out in greasy hanks, sunset red. He washed at the pump, stripping off his shirt, and Melina noticed it was nice to see a waist on a man again. Frex, bless him, had run to plumpness in the year and some since Elphaba's birth. Were all quadlings this delicious dusty rose color? The man's name, Melina learned, was Turtleheart, and he was a glassblower from Ovals, in the little-known Quadling country. She bundled up her breasts at last, reluctantly. Elphaba squawked to be let loose, and without so much as flinching, the visitor unbuckled her and swept her in the air and caught her again. The child crowed with surprise. Excuse me. Woo. The child crowed with delight, even surprise, and Turtleheart repeated the trick. Melina took advantage of his concentration on the brat to scoop up the uneaten minnow from the dirt and rinse it off. She plopped it among the eggs and mashed tar root, hoping that Elphaba would not suddenly learn to speak and embarrass her. It would be just like the child to do that. But Elphaba was too charmed by this man to fuss or complain. She didn't even whine when Turtleheart finally came to the bench and sat to eat. She crawled between his sleek, hairless calves, for he had shucked off his leggings, and she moaned some private tune with a satisfied smirk on her face. Melina found herself jealous of a female not yet 2 years old. She wouldn't have minded sitting on the ground between Turtleheart's legs. "I've never met a quadling before," she said, too loudly, too brightly. The months of solitude had made her forget her manners. "My family would never have quadlings in to dine. Not that there were many, or even any, for all I know, in the farmlands around my family's estate. The stories make out that quadlings were sneaky and incapable of telling the truth." "How can a quadling to answer such a charge if a quadling is given always to lie?" He smiled at her. She melted like butter on warm bread. "I'll believe anything you say." He told her of the life in the outreaches of Ovals, the houses rotting gently into the swamp, the harvest of snails and milkweed, the customs of communal living and ancestor worship. So you believe your ancestors are with you? She prodded. I don't mean to be nosy, but I've become interested in religion despite myself. Does Lady to believe ancestors are with her? She could hardly focus on the question. So bright were his eyes, and so wonderful it was to be called Lady. Her shoulders straightened. My immediate ancestors couldn't be farther away, she admitted. I mean, my parents, they're still living, but so uninteresting to me they might as well be dead. When dead, they may to visit Lady often. They are not welcome. Go away, she laughed, shooing. You mean ghosts? They'd better not. That's what I'd call the worst of both worlds, if there is an other land. There is an other world, he said with certainty. She felt chilled. She scooped Elphaba up and hugged her tightly. Elphaba sagged as if boneless in her arms, neither fussing nor returning the hug, just falling limp from the novelty of being touched. Are you a seer? Said Melina. Turtle heart to blow glass, he said. He seemed to mean that as an answer. Melina was suddenly reminded of the dreams she used to have, of exotic places she knew was too dull to invent. Married to a minister, and I don't know that I believe in another world, she admitted. She hadn't meant to say that she was married, although she supposed the child implicated her. But Turtleheart had finished talking. He put down his plate. He had left the minnow, and he took from his satchels a small pot, a pipe, and some sacks of sand and soda ash and lime and other materials. Might Turtleheart to thank Lady for her welcome? He asked. She nodded. He built up the kitchen fire and sorted and mixed his ingredients, and arranged utensils, and cleaned the bowl of his pipe with a special rag folded in its own pouch. Elphaba sat clump-like, her green hands on her green toes, curiosity on her sharp, pinched face. Melina had never seen glass blown, just as she had never seen paper made, cloth woven, or logs hewn from tree trunks. It seemed as marvelous to her as the local stories of the traveling clock that had hexed her husband into the professional paralysis from which he still hadn't quite escaped, though he tried. Turtleheart hummed a note through his nose or the pipe as he blew an irregular bulb of hot, greenish ice. It steamed and hissed in the air. He knew what to do with it. He was a wizard of glass. Melina had to hold Elphaba back to keep her from burning her hands as she reached for it. In what seemed like no time at all, in what felt like magic, the glass had gone from being semi-liquid and abstract into a hardening, cooling reality. It was a smooth, impure circle, like a slightly oblong plate. All the while, Turtleheart worked with it. Melina thought of her own character. Excuse me. Going from youthful ether to hardening shell, transparently empty. Breakable, too. But before she could lose herself in remorse, Turtleheart took her two hands and passed them near, but not touching the flat surface of the glass. Lady to talk with ancestors, he said. But she would not struggle to connect with old, boring dead people in the other land, not when his huge hands covered hers. She breathed through her nose to suppress the smell of breakfast in an unwashed mouth. Fruit and one glass of wine. Or was it two? She thought she might well faint. Look in glass, he urged her. She could only look at his neck and his raspberry honey-colored skin. He looked for her. Elphaba came and steadied herself with a small hand on his knee and peered in too. Husband is near, said Turtleheart. Was this prophecy through a glass dish, or was he asking her a question? But he went on. Husband is traveling on a donkey, and to bring elderly woman to visit you. Is ancestor to visit? Is old nursemaid, probably, Melina said. She was sloping downward into his crippled syntax in unabashed sympathy. Can you really to see that in there? He nodded. Elphaba nodded too. But at what? How much time do we have before he gets here? She asked. Till this evening. They did not speak another word until sunset. They banked the fire and hooked Elphaba to a harness. and sat her down in front of the cooling glass, which they hung on a string like a lens or a mirror. It seemed to mesmerize and calm her, and she did not even gnaw absent-mindedly at her wrists or toes. They left the door to the cottage open so that from time to time they could peer out from the bed to check on the child who, in the glare of the sunny day, would not be able to focus her eyes to see in the house shadows, and who anyway never turned to look. Turtleheart was unbearably beautiful. Melina dragon-snaked with him, covered him with her mouth, and poured him in her hands, heated and cooled and shaped his luminosity. He filled her emptiness. They were washed and dressed, with supper mostly made, when the donkey brayed a half a mile down the lake. Melina blushed. Turtleheart was back at the pipe, blowing again. Elphaba turned and looked in the direction of the donkey's serrated statement. Her lips, which always looked almost black against the new apple color of her skin, twisted tight, chewing against each other. She bit her lower lip as if thinking. But she did not bleed. She had learned to manage the teeth somewhat, through trial and error. She put her hand on the shining disk. The glass circlet caught the last blue of the sky until it looked like a magic mirror showing nothing but silver-cold water within. I forgot my water. I'm sorry. Give me 2 seconds, guys. I'll be right back. I'm getting water. I'll be right back. Okay. Back with water. Sorry, guys. I'm all out of sorts this evening. All right. Geographies of the seen and the unseen. Hey, Taylor Joe. All the way from Stonespar End, where Frex met her coach, Nanny complained. Lumbago, weak kidneys, fallen arches, aching gums, sore haunches. Frex wanted to say, "And how about your swollen ego?" Though he had been out of circulation for a while, he knew such a remark would be rude. Nanny flounced and petted herself, clinging determinedly to her seat until they arrived at the lodge near Rush Margins. Melina greeted Frex with affecting shyness. "My breastplate, my backbone," she murmured. She was slender after a hard winter, her cheekbones more prominent. Her skin looked scoured, as if by an artist's scratch brush. But she had always had the look of an etching in the flesh. She was usually bold with her kisses, and he found her reticence alarming until he realized there was a stranger in the shadows. Then, after introductions, Nanny and Melina fussed to get a meal on the table, and Frex put out some oats for the sorry nag who had to pull the carriage. When this was done, he went to sit in the spring evening light and to meet his daughter again. Elphaba was cautious around him. He found in his pouch a trinket he'd whittled for her, a little sparrow with a cunning beak and upraised wings. "Look, Fabula," he whispered. Melina hated the derivative, so he used it. It was his and Elphaba's private bond, the father-daughter pact against the world. "Look what I found in the forest, a little maple wood bird." The child took the thing in her hands. She touched it softly and put its head in her mouth. Frex steeled himself to hear the inevitable splintering and to hold back his sigh of disappointment. But Elphaba did not bite. She sucked at the head and looked at it again. Wet, it had greater life. "You like it?" Frex said. She nodded and began to feel its wings. Now that she was distracted, Frex could draw her between his knees. He nuzzled his crinkly bearded chin into her hair. She smelled like soap and wood smoke, and the char on toast, a good, healthy smell, and he closed his eyes. It was good to be home. He had spent the winter in an abandoned shepherd's hut on the windward slope of Griffin's Head, praying and fasting, moving deeper inside and then further outside himself. And why not? At home, he had felt the scorn of the people of the whole claustrophobic valley of Ilswater. They had connected the time-dragon slanderous story of a corrupt minister with the arrival of a deformed child. They had drawn their own conclusions. They avoided his chapel services. So a sort of hermit's life, at least in small intervals, seemed both penance and preparation for something else, something next. But what? He knew this life wasn't what Melina had originally expected, marrying him. With his bloodlines, Frex had looked primed for an elevation to proctor, or even, eventually, bishop. He had imagined the happiness Melina would have as a society dame, presiding over feast day dinners and charity balls and episcopal teas. Instead, he could see her in the firelight, grating a last limp winter carrot into a pan of fish. Here, she wasted away, a partner in a difficult marriage on a cold, shadowy lakeshore. Frex had a notion that she wasn't sorry to see him go off from time to time, so that she could be glad to see him come back. As he ruminated, his beard tickled Elphaba's neck, and she snapped the wings off her wooden sparrow. She sucked on it like a whistle. Twisting away from him, she ran to a glass lens hanging from the projecting eave, and swatted at it. "Don't! You'll break that," said her father. "She cannot to break that." The traveler, the quadling, came from the sink where he'd been washing up. "She just turned her toy into a cripple," Frex said, pointing at the ruined birdling. She is herself pleased at the half things," Turtleheart said. "I think. The little girl to play with the broken pieces better." Frex didn't quite get it, but nodded. He knew that months away from the human voice made him clumsy at first. The boy from the inn, who had climbed Griffin's Head to deliver Nanny's request to be picked up at Stone Spar End, had obviously thought Frex a wild man, grunting and unkempt. Frex had had to quote a little of the Oziad to indicate some sort of humanity. Land of green abandon, land of endless leaf. It was all that would come to him. "Why can't she break it?" asked Frex. "Because I do not to make it to be broken," answered Turtleheart. But he smiled at Frex, not aggressively, and Elphaba wandered around with the shiny glass as if it were a toy, catching shadows, reflections, lights on its imperfect surface, almost as if she were playing. "Where are you going?" asked Frex, just as Turtleheart was saying, "Where are you from?" "I'm a Munchkinlander," said Frex. "I to think all Munchkins to be shorter than I or you." "The peasants, the farmers, yes," Frex said, "but anyone with bloodlines worth tracing married into height somewhere along the way. And you? You're from Quadling country?" "Yes," said the Quadling. His reddish hair had been washed and was drying into an airy nimbus. Frex was glad to see Melina so generous as to offer a passerby water to bathe in. Perhaps she was adjusting to country life after all, because, mercy, a Quadling ranked about as low on the social ladder as it was possible to get, and still be human. "But I to understand," said the Quadling, "Ovals is a small world. Until I to leave, I am not to know of hills, one beyond the other, and from the spiny backbones a world so wide around, the blurry far away to hurt my eyes, for I cannot to make it seen. Please, sir, to describe the world you know." Frex picked up a stick. In the soil he drew an egg on its side. "What they taught me in lessons," he said. "Inside the circle is Oz. Make an X." He did so, through the oval, and roughly speaking, you have a pie in 4 sections. The top is Gillikin, full of cities and universities and theaters, civilized life, they say, and industry. He moved clockwise. East is Munchkinland, where we are now. Farmland, the breadbasket of Oz, except down in the mountains south. These strokes, In the district of Wend Hardings are the hills you're climbing. He bumped and squiggled. Directly south of the center of Oz is Quadling Country. Badlands, I'm told. Marshy, useless, infested with bugs and feverish airs. Turtleheart looked puzzled at this, but nodded. Then west, what they call Winky Country. Don't know much about that except it's dry and unpopulated. And around? Said Turtleheart. Sandstone deserts, north and west. Fleckstone desert, east and south. They used to say the desert sands were deadly poison. That's just standard propaganda. Keeps invaders from Eve and Quawks from trying to get in. Munchkinland is rich and desirable farming territory, and Gillikin's not bad either. The Gillikus up there. He scratched lines in the northeast, on the border between Gillikin and Munchkinland, are the emerald mines and the famous Gillikus canals. I gather there's a dispute whether the Gillikus is Munchkinlander or Gillikinese, but I have no opinion on that. Turtleheart moved his hands over the drawing in the dirt, flexing his palms, as if he were reading the map from above. But here, he said, what is here? Frex wondered if he meant the air above Oz. The realm of the unnamed god, he said, the other land? Are you a unionist? Turtleheart is glassblower, said Turtleheart. I mean religiously. Turtleheart bowed his head and didn't meet Frex's eye. Turtleheart is not to know what name to call this. I don't know about Quadlings, said Frex, warming to a possible convert, but Gillikinese and Munchkinlanders are largely unionist. Since Lurlinist paganism went out, for centuries there have been unionist shrines and chapels all over Oz. Are there none in Quadling Country? Turtleheart does not recognize what this is, he said. And now respectable unionists are going in droves over to the pleasure faith, said Frex, snorting. Or even TikTokism, which hardly even qualifies as a religion. To the ignorant, everything is spectacle these days. The ancient unionist monks and mounts knew their place in the universe, acknowledging the life source too sublime to be named, and now we sniff up the skirts of every musty magician who comes along. Hedonists, anarchists, solipsists. Individual freedom and amusement is all, as if sorcery had any moral component. Charms, alley magic, industrial strength sound and light displays, fake shape changers. Charlatans, nabobs of necromancy, chemical and herbal wisdoms, humbug hedonists, selling their bog recipes and crone aphorisms and schoolboy spells. It makes me sick. Turtleheart said, Shall Turtleheart to bring you water? Shall Turtleheart to lie you down? He put fingers soft as calfskin on the side of Frex's neck. Frex shivered and realized he had been shouting. Nanny and Melina were standing in the doorway with the pan of fish, silent. It's a figure of speech. I'm not sick, he said, but he was touched at the concern the foreigner had shown. I think we'll eat now. And they did. Elphaba ignored her food except to prod the eyes out of the baked fish and to try to fit them onto her wingless bird. Nanny grumbled good-naturedly about the wind off the lake, her chills, her backbone, her digestion. Her gas was apparent from more than a few feet away, and Frex moved, as discreetly as possible, to be upwind. He found himself sitting next to the Quadling on the bench. So, is all that clear to you? Frex pointed a fork at the map of Oz. Is Emerald City to be where? Said the Quadling, fish bones poking out from between his lips. Dead center, Frex said. And there is Ozma, said Turtleheart. Ozma, the ordained queen of Oz, or so they say, Frex said, though the unnamed god must be ruler of all in our hearts. How can unnamed creator to rule? Began Turtleheart. No theology at dinner, sang out Melina. That's a house rule dating from the start of our marriage, Turtleheart, and we obey it. Besides, I still harbor a devotion to Lurline. Nanny made a face in Frex's direction. Old folks like me are allowed to. Do you know about Lurline, stranger? Turtleheart shook his head. If we have no theology, then we surely have no errant pagan nonsense, began Frex. But Nanny, being a guest and invoking a touch of deafness when it suited her, plowed on. Lurline is the fairy queen who blew over the sandy wastes and spotted the green and lovely land of Oz below. She left her daughter Ozma to rule the country in her absence, and she promised to return to Oz in its darkest hour. Ha! Said Frex. No ha's at me, Nanny sniffed. I'm as entitled to my beliefs as you are, Frex Spar the Godly. At least they don't get me into trouble as yours do. Nanny, govern your temper, said Melina, enjoying this. It's rubbish, said Frex. Ozma rules in the Emerald City, and anyone who has seen her, or paintings of her, knows that she's from Gillikinese stock. She's got the same broad band of forehead, the slightly gapped front teeth, the frenzy of curling blonde hair, the quick shifts of mood, usually into anger, all characteristic of Gillikinese peoples. You've seen her, Melina. Tell him. Oh, she is elegant in her way, Melina admitted. The daughter of a fairy queen, said Turtleheart. More nonsense, said Frex. Not nonsense, snapped Nanny. They think she bears herself again and again like a phoenix, said Frex. Ha! And double ha! There they've been 300 years of There have been 300 years of very different Ozmas. Ozma the Mendacious was a dedicated Mont, who lowered rulings in a bucket down from the topmost chamber in a cloister tower. She was as mad as a dung beetle. Ozma the Warrior conquered the Gillikus, at least for a time, and commandeered the emeralds with which to decorate the Emerald City. Ozma the Librarian did nothing but read genealogies for her whole life long. Then there was Ozma the Scarcely Beloved, who kept pet ermines. She overtaxed the farmers to begin the road system of yellow brick that they're still struggling to complete, and much luck to them, I say. Who is Ozma now? Asked Turtleheart. Actually, said Melina, I had the pleasure to meet the last Ozma at a social season in the Emerald City. My grandfather, the eminent Throp, had a townhouse. The winter I was 15, I was brought out into society there. She was Ozma the Bilious, because of a bad stomach. She was the size of a lake narwhal, but she dressed beautifully. I saw her with her husband, Pastorius, at the Oz Festival of Song and Sentiment. She is no longer the queen? Asked Turtleheart, confused. She died in an unfortunate accident involving some rat poison, said Frex. Died, said Nanny, or her spirit moved next into her child, Ozma Tipitarius. The current Ozma is just about the age of Elphaba, said Melina, so her father, Pastorius, is the Ozma regent. The good man will rule until Ozma Tipitarius is old enough to take the throne. Turtleheart shook his head. Frex was annoyed because they had spent so much time talking about the worldly ruler and ignored the eternal realm, and Nanny lapsed into a bout of indigestion for which they were all very sorry, olfactorily speaking. Anyway, even being irritated, Frex was glad to be home, because the beauty of Melina, she was almost glowing tonight as the sun left the sky, and because of the surprise of Turtleheart, smiling and unself-conscious next to him. Maybe because of Turtleheart's religious emptiness, which Frex found challenging and appealing, almost tempting. Then there's the dragon beneath Oz, in a hidden cavern, Nanny was saying to Turtleheart, the dragon who has dreamt the world, and who will burn it in flames when he wakes. Shut up, that superstitious codswallop, shouted Frex. Elphaba, on all fours, advanced on the uneven planks of the flooring. She bared her teeth, as if she knew what a dragon was, as if she were pretending, and roared. Her green skin made her more persuasive, as if she were a dragon child. She roared again. Oh, sweetheart, don't, said Frex, and she peed on the floor and sniffed her urine with satisfaction and disgust. Elphaba is a truly unique child in this story, to be sure. Child's Play. One afternoon toward the end of summer, Nanny said, "There's a beast abroad. I've seen it at dusk several times, lurking about in the ferns. What sorts of creatures are native to these hills anyway?" "You don't find anything larger than a gopher," said Melina. They were at the side of the brook, working at laundry. The small spring wetness had long since ceased, and the drought had clamped its hand down again. The stream was only a thin trickle. Elphaba, who would not come near the near the water, was stripping a wild pear tree of its stunted crop. She clung to the trunk with her hands and outturned feet, and threw her head around, catching the sour fruit with her teeth, and then spitting the seeds and stem on the ground. "This is larger than a gopher," said Nanny. "Trust me. Have you bears?" It could have been a bear cub, though it moved mighty fast. "No bears. There's a rumor of rock tigers on the fell top, but they tell me not a single one has been sighted in ages, and rock tigers are notoriously skittish and shy. They don't come near human dwellings." "A wolf, then? Are there wolves?" Nanny let the sheet droop in the water. "It could have been a wolf." "Nanny, you think you're in the desert. Wend Hardings is desolate, I agree, but it's a tame barrenness for all that. You're alarming me with your wolf and your tiger talk." Elphaba, who would not speak yet, made a low growl in the pocket of her throat. "I don't like it," said Nanny. "Let's finish up and dry these things back at the house. Enough is enough. Besides, I have other things I want to say to you. Let's give the child to Turtleheart, and let's go off somewhere," she shuddered. "Somewhere safe." "What you have to say, you can say within earshot of Elphaba," said Melina. "You know she doesn't understand a word." "You confuse not speaking with not listening," said Nanny. "I think she understands plenty." "Look, she's smearing fruit on her neck, like a cologne." "Like a war paint, you mean?" "Oh, dour, Nanny. Stop being such a goose and scrub those sheets harder. They're filthy." "I need hardly ask whose sweat and leakage this is." "Oh, No, you needn't ask. But don't start moralizing at me. But you know Frex is bound to notice sooner or later these energetic afternoon naps you take. Well, you always had an eye for the fellow with a decent helping of sausage and hard-boiled eggs. Nanny, come, this is none of your affair." "More's the pity," said Nanny, sighing. "Isn't aging a cruel hoax? I'd trade my hard-worn pearls of wisdom for a good romp with Uncle Flagpole any day." Oh my God. Go off, Nanny? Okay. Melina flipped a handful of water in Nanny's face to shut her up. The older woman blinked, and she said, "Well, it's your garden. Plant there what you choose and reap what you may. What I want to talk about is the child, anyway." The girl was now squatting behind the pear tree, eyes narrowed at something in the distance. She looked, thought Melina, like a sphinx, like a stone beast. A fly even landed on her face and walked across the bridge of her nose, and the child didn't flinch or squirm. Then, suddenly, she leaped and pounced, a naked green kitten after an invisible butterfly. "What about her?" "Melina, she needs to get used to other children. She'll start talking a little bit if she sees that other chicks are talking. Talking among children is an overrated concept." "Don't be glib. You know she needs to get used to people other than us. She's not going to have an easy time of it anyhow, unless she sheds her greeny skin as she grows up. She needs the habits of conversation. Look, I give her chores to do. I warble nursery rhymes at her. Melina, why doesn't she respond like other children?" "She's boring. Some children just are." "She ought to have other pups to play with. They would infect her with a sense of fun." "Frankly, Frex doesn't expect a child of his to be interested in fun," said Melina. "Fun is counted for overmuch in this world, Nanny. I agree with him on that." So your dragon snaking with Turtleheart is what? Devotional exercises? I said don't be catty, please. Melina focused on the toweling, beating it with annoyance. Nanny would go on about this. She was up to something. And Nanny had hit the nail on the head. There crept Turtleheart into the cool shadows of the cottage, when Melina was tired from a morning's work in the vegetable garden. He covered her with a sense of holiness, and it was more than her undergarments that would drop away from her when they tumbled panting onto the bedclothes. She would lose her sense of shame. She knew that this did not follow conventional reason. Nevertheless, should a tribunal of Unionist ministers call her to court for adultery, she would tell the truth. Somehow Turtleheart had saved her and restored her sense of grace, of hope in the world. Her belief in the goodness of things had been dashed into bits when little green Elphaba crawled into being. The child was extravagant punishment for a sin so minor she didn't even know if she had committed it. It was not the sex that saved her, though the sex was mighty vigorous, even frightening. It was that Turtleheart didn't blush when Frex showed up, and he didn't shrink from the beastly little Elphaba. He set up shop in the side yard, blowing glass and grinding it, as if life had brought him here just to redeem Melina. Wherever else he might have been heading had been forgotten. Very well, you old interfering cow, said Melina. For the sake of argument, what do you propose? We must take Elfie to Rush Margins and find some small children for her to play with. Melina sat back on her haunches. But you have to be jesting, she cried. Slow and deliberate as Elphaba is, at least she's unharmed here. I may not be able to summon much maternal warmth, but I feed her, Nanny, and I keep her from hurting herself. How cruel to inflict the outside world on her. A green child will be an open invitation for scorn and abuse. And children are wickeder than adults. They have no sense of restraint. We might as well go throw her in the lake she's so terrified of. No, 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 said Nanny, putting her fat hands on her own knees. Her voice was thick with determination. Now, I'm going to argue with you about this, Melina, until you give in. Time and its wisdom will bring you around to my way of thinking. Listen to me. Listen to me. You are only a pampered little rich girl who flitted about from music lessons to dance lessons with neighborhood children equally rich and stupid as you. Of course there's cruelty, but Elphaba must learn who she is, and she must face down cruelty early, and there will be less of it than you expect. No, don't play nanny goddess with me. I won't have it. Nanny is not giving up, said Nanny, just as fiercely. I have a long-range view of your happiness as well as hers, and believe me, if you don't give her the weapons and armor with which she can defend herself against scorn, she'll make your life miserable as hers will be miserable. And the weapons and armor she'll learn from the dirty urchins of Rush Margins? Laughter, fun, teasing, smiling. Oh, please. I'm not above blackmailing you about this, Melina, said Nanny. I can wander into Rush Margins this afternoon and find where Frex is trying to hold his revival meeting and whisper a few words to him. While Frex is busy cranking up the religious ardor of Rush Margins sluggards, would he be interested in knowing what his wife is up to with Turtleheart? You are a miserable old fiend. You are a foul, unethical bully, cried Melina. Nanny grinned with pride. No later than tomorrow, she said. We'll go in tomorrow and get her life started. Excuse me. The air has been so dry lately. In the morning, a stiff, unforgiving wind galloped from the heights. It picked up old leaves and the remains of failed crops and kitchen gardens. Nanny pulled a shawl across her rounded shoulders and tugged a bonnet over her brow. Her eyes were full of marginal beasts. She kept turning to see a slinking cat thing or a vixen dissolve into clots of skeleton leaves and debris. Nanny found a backbone staff, a blackthorn staff, as if to aid her over stones and ruts, but she hoped to be ready to wield it against some hungry beast. The land is dry and cold, she observed, almost to herself, and so little rain. Of course the big beasts would be driven from the hills. Let's walk together. No running ahead, little green. They made their way in silence. Nanny fearful, Melina angry at having to miss her afternoon dalliance, and Elphaba like a wind-up toy, one foot solidly in front of the other. The margins of the lake had receded, and some of the crude docks were now walkways over pebble and drying greenrot, with the water pulled back beyond their reach. Gaunette's was a dark stone cottage with a roof of mouldering thatch. Because of a bad hip, Gaunette was no good at hauling the fishing nets or at kneeling over the wasting vegetable gardens. She had a mess of small children in various stages of undress, squalling and sulking and trotting around the dirty yard in a little pack. She looked up as the minister's family approached. "Good day, and you must be Gaunette," said Nanny brightly. She was pleased to open the gate and be safely inside the garden, even of this hovel. "Brother Frexbar told us we would find you here." "Sweet Lurline, what they say is true," said Gaunette, making a holy sign against Elphaba. "I thought it vicious lies, and here she is." The children had slowed to a walk. There were boys and girls, brown-faced and white, all of them filthy, all of them keen on something new. Though they kept walking, playing some game of endurance or make-believe, their eyes never left Elphaba. "You know this is Melina? Of course you do. And I'm their nanny," said Nanny. "We're pleased to meet you, Gaunette." She slid a glance at Melina and bit her upper lip and nodded. "Very pleased, I'm sure," said Melina stonily. "And we need some advice, for you come well recommended," said Nanny. "The little girl has problems, and the best of our thinking just doesn't seem to bring forth any good ideas." Gaunette leaned forward, suspicious. "The child is green," whispered Nanny confidentially. "You may not have noticed, being attracted by her charm and warmth. Of course, we know the good people of Rush Margins wouldn't let a thing like that bother them. Because she is green, though, she is shy. Look at her, little frightened spring turtle. We need to draw her out, make her happier, and we don't know how." "She's green, all right," said Gaunette. "No wonder useless Brother Frexbar retired from his preaching for so long." She threw back her head and laughed raucously, unkindly. "And he's only now had the nerve to take it up again. Well, that's balls if I ever heard it." Brother Frexbar, interrupted Melina coldly, "reminds us of the scriptures. No one knows the color of a soul. Gaunette, he suggested I remind you of that very text." "Did he now?" Gaunette mumbled, chastised. "Well then, what do you want with me?" "Let her play. Let her learn. Let her come here and be minded by you. You know more than we do," said Nanny. "The cunning old cow," thought Melina. "She is trying that rarest of strategies, telling the truth and making it sound plausible." They sat down. "I don't know if they'd take to her," said Gaunette, holding out a while. "And you know, my hip doesn't let me hop up and stop them when they get going." "Let's see. And of course there'd be some payment, some cash. Melina fully agrees," said Nanny. The barren vegetable plot had caught her attention. This was poverty. Nanny gave Elphaba a push. "Well, go on in, child, and see what's what." The girl didn't budge, didn't blink. The children came near to her. There were 5 boys and 2 girls. "What an ugly pug," said one of the older boys. He touched Elphaba on the shoulder. "Play nicely now," said Melina, about to leap up, but Nanny kept her hand out to say, "Stay down." "Tag! Let's tag," said the boy. "Who's the green fly?" "Not it, not it," the other children shrieked and rushed into brush to brush Elphaba with their hands, and then raced away. She stood for a minute, unsure, her own hands down and clenched, and then she ran a few steps and stopped. "That's the way. Healthful exercise," said Nanny, nodding. "Gaunette, you're a genius." "I know my chicks," said Gaunette. "Don't say I don't." Herd-like, the children rushed in again, tapping and darting away, but the girl would not chase them, so they neared her once more. Is it true you got a quadling muck frog staying with you too? Said Garnet. Is it true he only eats grass and dung? I beg your pardon, cried Melina. That's what they say. Is it true? Said Garnet. He's a fine man. But he's a quadling? Well, yes. Don't bring him around here, then. They spread the plague, said Garnet. They spread no such thing, snapped Melina. No throwing, Elfie dear, called Nanny. I'm only saying what I hear. They say at night that quadlings fall asleep, and their souls climb out through their mouths and go abroad. Stupid people say a lot of stupid things. Melina was curt and too loud. I have never seen his soul climb out of his mouth while he was sleeping, and I've had plenty of opportunity. Darling, no rocks, shrilled Nanny. None of the other children have rocks. Now they do, observed Garnet. He is the most sensitive person I've ever met, said Melina. Sensitive isn't much use to a fishwife, said Garnet. How about to a minister and a minister's wife? Now there's blood. How vexing, said Nanny. Children, let Elfie up so I can wipe that cut. And didn't I bring a rag? Garnet? Bleeding is good for them. Makes them less hungry, said Garnet. Irate, sensitive, a good sight higher than stupid, said Melina, seething. No biting, said Garnet to one of the little boys, and then, seeing Elphaba open her mouth to retaliate, raised herself to her feet, bad hip or no, and screamed, No biting, for the love of mercy! Aren't children divine? Said Nanny. All right. Got one final chapter left of this first part of the book, of course. And again, since this is going to be the last reading on TikTok, I'll be doing the rest of these readings of this book on my YouTube channel. Same time, well, I'm not going to make any promises about any scheduling yet. I need to figure out YouTube's live stuff first. I'm going to try and get that done before Sunday, but anyway. Darkness abroad. Every second or third day, Nanny took Elphaba by the hand and waddled the shadowy road to Rush Margins. There, Elphaba mingled with the greasy children under the eyes of sullen Garnet. Frex had moved out again. Was it confidence or desperation? He was scaring miserable hamlets with his frenzied beard and his collected opinions on faith. Gone for 8-10 days at a time, Melina practiced piano arpeggios on a tuneless mock keyboard Frex had carved for her to perfect scale. Turtleheart seemed to wilt and parch as autumn came on. Their afternoons of dalliance began to lose the heat of urgency and developed in warmth. Melina had always appreciated the attentions of Frex and been attentive to him, but somehow his body had not been as supple as Turtleheart's. She drifted off to sleep with Turtleheart's mouth on one of her nipples and his hands, his big hands, roaming like sentient pets. She imagined that Turtleheart divided his body when her eyes were closed. His mouth roamed, his cock rose and nudged and leaned. His breath was somewhere other than his mouth, hissing elegantly into her ear, wordlessly. His arms were like stirrups. Still, she didn't know him. Not the way she knew Frex. She could not see through him as she could most people. She put this down to his majestic bearing, but Nanny, ever watchful, remarked one evening that it was just that his ways were the ways of a quadling, and Melina had never even acknowledged that he came from a different culture than she did. Culture? What's culture? Melina said lazily. People are people. Don't you remember your nursery rhymes? Nanny put aside her sewing with relief and recited, Boys study, girls know, that's the way the lessons go. Boys learn, girls forget, that's the way of lessons yet. Gilliganese are sharp as knives, Munchkinlanders lead corny lives. Gilligans beat their ugly wives, Winkies swarm in sticky hives. But the quadlings, oh the quadlings, slimy, stupid, curse-at godlings, eat their young and bury their old, a day before their bodies get cold. Give me an apple and I'll say it again. What do you know of him? Nanny asked. Is he married? Why did he leave Lower Slime Pit or wherever he comes from? Naturally, it's not my place to ask such personal questions. Since when did you ever know your place or keep it either? Come on. Come on, let me verify the live. Come on. I have a feeling. There we go. Fabulous. Okay, good. Since when did you ever know your place, or keep it either? When Nanny leaves her place, believe me, you'll know, said Nanny. One evening in early autumn, for fun, they built up a fire in the yard. Frex was home and good-humored, and Nanny was thinking of heading back to Coleman grounds, which made Melina good-humored too. Turtleheart put together a supper, a distasteful goulash of small, sour new apples and cheese and bacon. Frex was feeling expansive. The effect of that blasted tick-tock continence and the clock of the time dragon had been wearing off at last, thank the unnamed god, and the graceless poor had been turning out to hear Frex harangue them. A 2-week mission at 3 Dead Trees had been a success. Frex had been rewarded with a small wallet of brass coins and barter tokens, and the glow of devotion or even lust on the face of more than one penitent. Perhaps our time here is limited, said Frex, sighing with contentment and clasping his arms behind his head. The typical male response to happiness, thought Melina, to predict its demise. Her husband went on. Perhaps the road from Rush Margins leads us on to higher things, Melina, grander stations in life. Oh, please, she said. My family rose from humble beginnings for 9 generations. To produce me with my ankles in the mud out here in the middle of nowhere. I don't believe in higher things. I mean the lofty ambitions of the spirit. I don't mean to storm the Emerald City and become personal confessor to the Ozma Regent. Why not put yourself forward to be the confessor to Ozma Tippetarius? Nanny asked. She could see herself rising in courtly Emerald City society if Frex had such a position. So what if the royal baby is only, 2 years old? 3? So we have government by a male regent again. It's only for a limited engagement. Like most male encounters. You're young still. She'll grow up. You'll be well placed to influence policy. I don't care about ministering to anyone in court. Not even an Ozma the fanatically devout. Frex lit a sallowwood pipe. My mission is to the downtrodden and humble. Goodness should to travel to Quadling country, said Turtleheart. Downtrodden there. Turtleheart didn't often speak of his past, and Melina remembered Nanny's jibe about her lack of curiosity. She waved the pipe smoke away and said, Why did you leave Ovals anyway? Horrors, he said. Elphaba, who had been hoping for ants to crawl across the grinding stone so she could mash them with a rock, looked up across the shallow basin of the stone. The others waited for Turtleheart to go on. Melina's heart lifted uneasily. She had a sudden premonition of things changing right here, this very evening, the most splendid, gentle night. Things going awry just when they had managed to settle down. What sort of horrors? Said Frex. I feel a chill. I'll get a shawl, said Melina. Or minister to Pastorius, the Ozma regent. Why not, Frex? Nanny said. I'm sure with Melina's family connections you could twist an invitation. Horrors, said Elphaba. It was her first word, and it was greeted with silence. Even the moon, a lambent bowl among the trees, seemed to pause. Horrors? Elphaba said again, looking around. Though her mouth was serious, her eyes glowed. She had realized her own accomplishment. She was nearly 2 years old. The big sharp teeth in her mouth could not keep her words locked inside her any more. Horrors, she tried in a whisper. Horrors. Come to Nanny, darling. Come sit on my lap and hush for a while. She obeyed, but sat forward, apart from Nanny's cushiony bosom, allowing Nanny's arms to ring around her waist, but no contact more than that. She stared at Turtle Heart and waited. And Turtle Heart said in an awed voice, Turtle Heart is thinking the child to speak for the first time. Yes, said Frex, exhaling a ring of smoke, and she's asking about the horrors, unless you don't dare to tell us. Turtle Heart to say little, Turtle Heart to work in glass, and to leave words for the goddess and the lady and the nanny, and now for the girl. Say a little, though, since you brought it up. Melina shivered. She hadn't gone for the shawl. She could not move. She was heavy as stone. Workers from the Emerald City and other places, they to come to Quadling Country, they to look and taste and sample the air, the water, the soil, they to plan the highway. Quadlings, to know this is wasted time and wasted effort. They do not to listen to Quadling voices. Quadlings aren't road engineers, I suspect, said Frex evenly. The country is delicate, said Turtle Heart. In ovals, the houses to float between trees. Crops to grow on small platforms hooked by ropes. Boys to dive in shallow water for vegetable pearls. Too many trees. Oh. Too many trees, and there is not enough light for crops and health. Too few trees, and the water rises, and roots of plants floating on top cannot to stretch to soil. Quadling Country is poor country, but beauty-rich. It only to support life by careful planning and cooperation. So, resistance to the yellow brick road is only part of the story. Quadlings cannot to convince road builders who want to build up dikes of mud and stone and to cut Quadling Country in pieces. Quadlings to argue and to pray and to testify and cannot to win with words. Frex held his pipe in his two hands and watched Turtle Heart speak. Frex was drawn to him. Frex was always drawn to intensity. Quadlings consider to fight, said Turtle Heart, because they think this is only the start. When the builders to test soil and to sift water, they to learn of things Quadlings are smart for ever, but Quadlings to keep still. Things to know? Turtle Heart to speak of rubies, he said with a great sigh. Rubies under the water, red as pigeon blood. Engineers to say, red corundum in bands of crystalline limestone under swamp. Quadlings to say, the blood of Oz. Like the red glass you make, said Melina. Ruby glass to come by adding gold chloride, said Turtle Heart. But Quadling Country to sit atop real deposits of real rubies, and the news is sure to go to the Emerald City with the builders. What to follow is horror upon horror. How do you know? Snapped Melina. To look in glass, said Turtle Heart, pointing to the roundel he had made as a toy for Elphaba, is to see the future in blood and rubies. I don't believe in seeing the future. That smacks of the pleasure faith, said Frex fiercely. The fatalism of the time dragon. Pah! No, the unnamed god has an unnamed history for us, and prophecy is merely guesswork and fear. Fear and guesswork is enough to make Turtle Heart to leave Quadling Country then, said the Quadling glassblower without apology. Quadlings do not to call their religion a pleasure faith, but they to listen to signs and to watch for messages. As the water to run red with rubies, it will to run with the blood of Quadlings. Nonsense, Frex fussed, red himself. They need a good talking to. Besides, isn't Pastorius a simpleton? Said Melina. Who alone of them could claim an informed opinion on the royal house? What will he do until Ozma is of age but ride the hunt and eat Munchkinlander pastries? There's an F word coming. And fuck the odd housemaid on the side. Sorry. The danger is a foreigner, said Turtleheart, not a homegrown king or queen. The old women and the shamans and the dying, they to see a stranger king, cruel and mighty. What is the Ozma regent doing? Planning roadworks into that godforsaken mire anyway? Melina asked. Progress, said Frex, same as the yellow brick road through Munchkinland. Progress and control, the movement of troops, the regularization of taxes, military protection. Protection from whom? Said Melina. Ah, said Frex, always the important question. Ah, said Turtleheart, almost in a whisper. So where are you going? Said Frex. Not that you need to leave here, of course. Melina loves having you around. We all do. Horrors, said Elphaba. Hush now, said Nanny. Lady is kind, and goodness is kind to Turtleheart, who did not mean to stay more than a day. Turtleheart was on his way to the Emerald City and to get lost. Turtleheart to hope to beg audience with Ozma. Ozma Regent now, interjected Frex, and to plead mercy for Quadling Country, and to warn of brutal stranger. Horrors, said Elphaba, clapping her hands together in delight. The child to remind Turtleheart of his duties, he said. To talk of it brings duties back out of the pain of the past. Turtleheart to forget. But when words are to speak in the air, actions must follow. Melina glared hatefully at Nanny, who had dropped the girl on the ground and begun to busy herself with collecting the supper dishes. See what comes of prying and nosiness, Nanny? See? Just the dissolution of my only earthly happiness is all. Melina turned her face from the horrid child, who seemed to be smiling. Or was that wincing? She looked at her husband with despair. Do something, Frex. Perhaps this is the higher ambition we seek, he was murmuring. We should travel to Quadling Country, Melina. We should leave the luxury of Munchkinland and try ourselves in the fire of a truly needy situation. The luxury of Munchkinland? Melina's voice was screechy. When the unnamed god speaks through a lowly vessel, began Frex, gesturing at Turtleheart, who was looking desperate again, we can choose to hear, or we can choose to harden our hearts. Well, hear this, then, said Melina. I'm pregnant, Frex. I can't travel. I can't move. And with a new infant to watch as well as Elphaba to raise, it's too much to suggest tramping around Mudland. After the stillness had lost some of its steam, she continued, Well, I didn't intend to tell you like this. Congratulations, said Frex coldly. Horrors, said Elphaba to her mother. Horrors, horrors, horrors. That's enough thoughtless chatter for one night, said Nanny, taking charge. Melina, you will catch a chill sitting out here. Summer nights are turning colder again. Come inside, and let's that be that. But Frex got himself up and went to kiss his wife. It was not clear to anyone whether he suspected that Turtleheart was the father, nor was it clear to Melina which one, her husband or her lover, was the father. She actually didn't care. She just didn't want Turtleheart to leave, and she hated him fiercely for being so suddenly riven with moral feeling for his miserable people. Frex and Turtleheart conversed in low voices that Melina could not make out. They sat by the fire with their heads low together, and Frex had his arm on Turtleheart's shaking shoulders. Nanny readied Elphaba for bed, left her outside with the men, and came to sit on Melina's bed with a glass of hot milk on a tray and a small bowl of medicinal capsules. Well, I knew this was coming, said Nanny calmly. Drink the milk, dear, and stop sniveling. You're behaving like a child again. How long have you known? Oh, 6 weeks, said Melina. I don't want milk, Nanny. I want my wine. You'll drink milk. No more wine till the baby's born. You want another disaster? Drinking wine doesn't change the skin color of embryos, said Melina. I may be a dolt, but I know that much about biology. It's bad for your frame of mind. Nothing more and nothing less. Drink the milk and swallow one of these capsules. What for? I did what I told you I'd do, said Nanny in a conspiratorial voice. Last fall, I poked around the lower quarter of our fair capital on your behalf. The young woman was suddenly engaged. Nanny, you didn't. How clever! Weren't you terrified? Of course I was. But Nanny loves you, however stupid you are. I found a store marked with the secret insignia of the alchemist's trade. She wrinkled her nose in recollection of the smell of rotting ginger and cat piss. I sat down with a saucy-looking old biddy from Shiz, a crone named Yackle, and drank the tea and upended the cup so she could read the leaves. Yackle could barely see her own hand, much less read the future. A real professional, Melina said dryly. Your husband doesn't believe in predictions, so keep your voice down. Anyway, I explained about the greenness of your first child and the difficulty of knowing exactly why it happened. We don't want a recurrence, I said. So, Yackle ground up some herbs and minerals and roasted it with oil of gomba and said some pagan prayers, and for all I know, she spit in it. I didn't watch too closely, but I paid for a 9-month supply to be begun as soon as you're sure you've conceived. We're a month late maybe, but this will be better than nothing. I have supreme confidence in this woman, Melina, and you should too. Why should I? Said Melina, swallowing the first of 9 capsules. It tasted like boiled marrow. Because Yackle predicted greatness for your children, said Nanny. She said Elphaba will be more than you credit, and your second will follow suit. She said not to give up on your life. She said history waits to be written, and this family has a part in it. What does she say about my lover? You are a pest, said Nanny. She said to rest and not to worry. She gives her blessing. She's a filthy whore, but she knows what she's talking about. Nanny didn't mention that Yackle was certain the next child would be a girl, too. There was too much chance Melina would try to abort her, and Yackle sounded quite sure that history belonged on 2 sisters, not a single girl. And you got home safely? Did anyone suspect? Who would suspect innocent old Nanny of trading in illegal substances in the lower quarter, laughed Nanny. I do my knitting and mind my own business. Now, go to sleep, my love. Nix to the wine for the next few months, and stay the course with this medicine, and we'll have for you and Frex a decent, healthy child, which will provide no end of recovery for your marriage. My marriage is perfectly fine, said Melina, snuggling down under the covers. The capsule had a kick, but she didn't want Nanny to know, as long as we don't go wading off into the muddy sunset. The sun sets in the west, not in the south, said Nanny soothingly. It was a masterly stroke to bring up the pregnancy tonight, my dear. I wouldn't come to visit you if you went paddling off into Quadling country, by the way. I'm 50 years old this year, you know. There are some things Nanny is really too old to do. Well, nobody better go anywhere, said Melina, and began to fall asleep. Nanny, pleased with herself, glanced out the window again as she prepared to retire. Frex and Turtleheart were still deep in conversation. Nanny was sharper than she let on. She had seen Turtleheart's face when he was remembering the threat to his people. It had opened like a hen's egg, and the truth had fluttered and wobbled out of it just as naive as a yellow chick, and as fragile. No wonder Frex was sitting nearer to the beleaguered Quadling than Nanny thought was altogether decent. But there seemed no end of oddity to this family. Send the girl in so I can put her down, she called from the window, partly to interrupt their intimacy. Frex looked around. She's in, isn't she? Nanny glanced. The child was not given to hiding games, neither here nor with the brats in the village. No? Isn't she with you? The men turned and looked. Nanny thought she saw a blur of movement in the blue shadows of the wild yew. She stood up and held on to the window's ledge. Well, find her. It's the prowling hour. There's nothing here, Nanny. It's your overactive imagination, drawled Frex. But the men were up quickly and looking around. Melina, dear, don't sleep yet. Do you know where Elphaba is? Did you see her wander off? Said Nanny. Melina struggled to lift herself to one elbow. She stared through her hair and in her inebriation. What are you on about? She asked in a slur. Who is wandering off? Elphaba, Nanny said. Come on, you better get up. Where could she be? Where could she be? She started to help Melina up, but it was happening too slowly, and Nanny's heart was beginning to beat fast. She fixed Melina's hands to the bedpost, saying, Now come on, Melina, this is not good. And she reached for her blackthorn staff. Who? Said Melina. Who's lost? The men were calling in the purple gloaming. Fabula! Elphaba! Elfie, little frog! They circled out away from the yard, away from the dying embers of the dinner fire, peering and hitting at the lower branches of bushes. Little snake! Lizard girl, where are you? It's the thing! The thing has come down from the hills, whatever it is, cried Nanny. There's no thing, you old fool, said Frex, but he leaped more and more vigorously from rock to rock behind the lodge, smacking branches aside. Turtleheart stood still, his hands out to the sky, as if trying to receive the faint light of the first stars into his palms. Is it Elphaba? Called Melina from the door, finally focusing and stepping forward in her nightgown. Is the child gone? She's wandered off. She's been taken, said Nanny fiercely. These two idiots were flirting like schoolgirls, and the beast from the hills is abroad. Melina called, her words mounting in pitch and terror. Elphaba! Elphaba, you listen to me! Come here this instant! Elphaba! The wind alone answered. She is not far, said Turtleheart after a moment. In the deepening dark he was almost invisible, while Melina in her white poplin glowed like an angel, as if lit from within. She is not far. She just is not here. What the devil do you mean, said Nanny, weeping, with your riddles and your games? Turtleheart turned. Frex had come back to him, to throw an arm around him and hold him up, and Melina came forward to his other side. He sagged for a minute as if fainting. Melina cried out in fright, but Turtleheart straightened up and began to move forward, and they headed toward the lake. Not the lake. Not that girl. She can't abide water. You know that, called Nanny. But she was rushing forward now, using her staff to feel the ground ahead of her so she wouldn't stumble. This is the end, thought Melina. Her brain was too foggy to think anything else, and she said it again and again, as if to prevent it from being true. This is the beginning, thought Frex. But of what? She is not far. She is not here, said Turtleheart again. Punishment for your wicked ways, you two-faced hedonists, Nanny said. The ground sloped toward the still, receded margin of the lake, first at their feet, then at their waists and higher. The beached dock rose like a bridge to nowhere, ending in air. Beneath the dock, in the dry shadows, there were eyes. Oh, sweet Lurline, whispered Nanny. Elphaba was sitting under the dock, with the looking-glass that Turtleheart had made. She held it in two hands and stared at it with one eye closed. She peered. She squinted. Her open eye was distant and hollow. Reflection from the starlight off the water, thought Frex, hoped Frex. But he knew the bright vacant eye was not lit by starlight. Horrors, murmured Elphaba. Turtleheart tumbled to his knees. She sees him coming, he said thickly. She sees him to come. He is to come from the air. Is arriving. A balloon from the sky. The color, a bubble of blood. A huge crimson globe. A ruby globe. He falls from the sky. The regent is fallen. The house of Ozma is fallen. The clock was right. A minute to judgment. He fell over, almost into Elphaba's small lap. She didn't seem to notice him. Behind her was a low growl. There was a beast, a fell-topped tiger, or some strange hybrid of tiger and dragon, with glowing orangey eyes. Elphaba was sitting in its folded forearms as if on a throne. Horrors, she said again, looking without binocular vision, staring at the glass in which her parents and Nanny could make out nothing but darkness. Horrors. All right. That brings us to the end of the first part of Wicked. Thank you all so very much for being on this journey with me. I am going to miss you all if somehow we are all separated after this app goes away. But like I said, you can find me on YouTube, and for now you can find me on Instagram. And I will be, again, experimenting with RedNote, experimenting with Blue Sky to see if either of those platforms are of any interest to me. But yeah, no matter if you choose to follow me on YouTube or not, I hope you do, of course, but if you don't, that's fine. Oh, you're welcome, Miss Janice. Thanks for staying and letting me read to you. No matter if you follow me on the apps or whatever, social media platforms of any kind, if you've been on this app yourself, and if you've been a creator of content, or if you've just enjoyed the content that you've seen on this app, do not be afraid to go out into the internet, the big, wide internet, and become a creator yourself. Share your voice with the world. I wasn't doing anything like this before the pandemic. And now here I am sitting in front of you guys with a following of 30,000 plus people. I didn't know that I had this in me. I was never really much for social media. But I have found that I really do love it. I enjoy it. And I enjoy being with you guys. So, we'll see each other again someday. Hopefully it's not too far in the distant future. But until then, I hope you guys take care of yourselves, take care of each other, stay hydrated, and stay golden. And I'll see you when I see you. I love you guys. Bye.